Okay, Aureen, whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Areen Zahra, and I'm the Assistant Curator at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. I'm so pleased to be joined on International Women's Day by two exceptional human beings and artists, Rania Matar and Ambreen Butt. Rania and Ambreen will talk to us about their incredibly powerful creative practices and their journeys as women in the arts. So the way we'll run this event is that Rania and Ambreen will individually present their work to us before we come together in a conversation. So we'll start with Rania first. Rania Matar was born and raised in Lebanon and moved to the US in 1984. As a Lebanese-born American artist and mother, her cross-cultural experience and personal narrative inform her photography. Rania's work has been widely exhibited in museums worldwide, including the MFA Boston, Carnegie Museum of Art, Minneapolis Institute of Art, Cornell Fine Arts Museum, and more. A mid-career retrospective of her work was recently on view at the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, and at the American University of Beirut Museum. Her many awards include a 2018 Guggenheim Fellowship and 2017 Mellon Foundation Artist in Residency Grant. She has published 3 books, L'Homme Femme Femme in 2016, A Girl in Her Room in 2012, and Ordinary Lives in 2009. She is currently working on her 4th book, She, published by Radius Books, which will be available in spring of 2021. Next slide, please, Carolyn. At the National Museum of Women in the Arts, Rania's work was first shown in 2016 in the blockbuster exhibition, She Who Tells a Story, Photographers from Iran and the Arab World, which was organized by the MFA Boston. The exhibition featured photographs from her series, A Girl in Her Room. And in the next slide, in 2019, Rania's work from her new and ongoing series, She, was included in the exhibition Live Dangerously. There's a presentation of work by 12 photographers who explore the female body in natural surroundings to suggest provocative narratives. So with that, I will turn it over to Rania to tell us a little bit more about her work. Rania, you're muted.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aureen and Ambreen. I am so honored to be here with you. And Carolyn, thank you for doing all the behind the scenes. I'm very honored for many reasons to be part of this panel. And Aureen mentioned my new book, but she didn't mention that she wrote a beautiful essay for my new book. So that I'm very honored to have as part of this work. Can you please go to the next slide? I'm going to talk about very briefly about my work and how I came into photography and how my work focuses on women and girls and on growing up and growing older. I'm originally trained as an architect. I'm from Lebanon, from Palestinian parents, and I came to the United States in 1984 to go to college, but I studied architecture with an emphasis on fine arts as well. I didn't get into photography till I was pregnant with my 4th child. So my photography is tied in every way possible to the sense of motherhood. I also grew up without a mother. My hero was my father, and my role model was my father. And I grew up as a tomboy. And I think through my work, I'm really kind of experimenting with that whole idea of womanhood, motherhood, being a mother to daughters as well. And this has been consistent in my work. I always start my presentations with pictures of my children, which is the top left photograph here, because that's what made me fall in love with photography. I started taking photography workshops when I was pregnant with my 4th kid, and I fell in love with the craft, with telling a story through photography, but especially with the sense of intimacy that I could create through those, and that I could build with people and create through the images, and the sense of finding the beauty in the mundane and the everyday. So after I was doing that, working as an architect and being a mom. And then after September 11, when the whole rhetoric changed on them versus us, and I am them and I am us, my whole sense of identity was a bit shattered. And I was dealing with that whole rhetoric, and I decided to tell a different story from the Middle East. So I started going back and forth to Lebanon and visiting Palestinian refugee camps. And I made pictures in the camps. And I found myself, without realizing it, I was instinctively drawn to the women and the mothers. And my work ended up focusing on that quite a bit. And I realized that I had such a unique access to this woman. And this is one of the images on the top, the image on top right. I had this unique access to the women, and I was in awe of them. I was in awe of how they're holding their homes together, they're raising their kids. And at some point I forgot that, you know, they're refugees and I'm not a refugee. And there was, what was binding us together was our sense of role as mothers. And I built relationships with them over the years. So this became part of my first book that started Ordinary Lives. And by then I decided I wanted to work in the US, where I live in the Boston area. My daughter was then 15, and I was fascinated with how she was changing. And I started this project that had some images at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, A Girl in Her Room. So I started photographing teenage girls in their bedroom, and I started this project in the United States. And at some point I realized that I was exactly like those women 25 years earlier at that point, in a different country, different culture. So I took the work to Lebanon. And in the book and in my work, the pictures are completely mixed in. These two young women at the bottom are Lebanese, and some people, you know, got into an argument when that exhibition was at the MFA in Boston. It would ask the curator, like, we thought you're only showing Arab women. And she said, I am showing Arab women. So they had a hard time believing that the woman, Christia, who's on the bottom left, is actually Lebanese. Can we please go to the next slide? So from that work became my second book that started A Girl in Her Room. And for me, that sense of photographing in both my cultures, but also in refugee camps and in upper scale areas of Lebanon, but also in the US, became consistent through my work. It's my identity, my daughter's identity. And for me, it was an important story to tell, to focus on the shared humanity in the middle of this divisiveness that we live in, but to focus on that shared humanity through girlhood and womanhood and growing up as those, you know, girls and women go through the transitions. And this is what binds us together. So the top two pictures are part of my series titled L'Enfant Femme, which became about the younger, the prepubescent girl. And and it's very much about the gaze, how they're gazing at me and how they're reacting to the camera. And eventually I started following some of those girls over the years. And this is the bottom left picture where I photographed Charlotte. On the left, she was 11, and on the right, she was 15. So I started following those girls as they go through puberty and after, and some of them now I have third and fourth photograph of them. So I became interested in the whole sense of the passing of time. And when my older daughter was leaving for college, I was realizing that my role as a mother was about to change. But also the fact that she's growing up means I'm getting older. And I started this project about mothers and daughters. So this is extremely personal to me, again, not having a mom and learning that whole relationship firsthand with my daughters. And the picture on the bottom right is also the next generation. And this is representing Huguette Calan, who was a very, an icon in Lebanon. She's a very famous Lebanese artist, and she could no longer paint, and I could feel the emotion between them. So I started crying as I was making that picture. And when I started crying, they both started crying. So I put my camera down, and she told me, you're an artist, emotions are important, don't stop. So she gave me permission to make that picture. Can we please go to the next slide? And again, about the story of the passing of time and how I kept in touch with most of the girls I photographed, they become women now. This is Samira, who I photographed. The first picture on the left is part of my Ordinary Life series, and this was in the refugee camp where she grew up. And I built a very special relationship with that girl. And I kept going. Every time I go to Lebanon, she's one of the first people I reach out to. And I adore her. So this is Samira through the years. And over the past 2 years, she asked me if we could make pictures outside the refugee camp. And so we left the camp, and this is the bottom picture in the water. That's part of my new series that's titled She Again. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the series She, and as you see, most of my earlier work was very much in the domestic, personal space, and here it's outside. It's in nature, or it's in the outside space, and that work again is following my daughters as they're growing up. And I might have not mentioned that all my work has been following my daughters through the years as they're growing up and going through transitions. And I was invited to do a residency at Kenyon College in Ohio, and I fell in love with the landscape. And at the same time, I was photographing these young women who had left home, which was the same age as my daughters had left home. So here they are basically the queen of their environment. I mean, they're not sitting in the landscape passively, but they're making it their own. And they are, in a way, metaphorically for me, is also photographing them when they leave home, how they're making this transition space that they're part of now, their new territory. So again, I took this work to Lebanon, and in Lebanon, you have, these young women did not grow up during the civil war that I grew up in, but it's part of the collective memory of the whole country. And where the texture is often in Ohio and in Boston, I was interested in the texture of the landscape. I became very interested in the texture of the walls and the architecture in Lebanon as well. The two pictures to the right were part of the exhibition To Live Dangerously. And I love that Oreen and Katie Watt, the other curator, had seen that aspect of Live Dangerously in my work, and I really ran with it. So it made my work be a little bolder, and the women I was photographing be bolder in the sense that they were taking risks and climbing on rocks, and we were both like completely getting out of our comfort zone. So for me, this work became very much about collaboration and empowerment, and about pushing the limits. Can we please go to the next slide? And this is actually Raven, who came to see her exhibition at the National Museum of Women in the Arts when it was exhibited. I had met Raven in Miami, and she's from Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. And I asked her if I could photograph her, and I feel like we shared such an intimate, incredible moment. And when I had asked her, I had just seen her head of hair, and then she turned around and I saw she was Black and albino and beautiful. So I texted her and told her that your picture is exhibited at the museum. And she texted me back that, thank you for seeing the beauty in me, which was very touching to me to hear that. And then she flew to DC to see her picture. Can we please go to the next slide? So I want to mention part of how the process of this work has been evolving. So the picture on the left, Ala, is a woman who actually reached out to me on Instagram and asked me if she could collaborate with me for my work. And I found that interesting because, she's not, she's covered completely in the abaya, what you call in Black, which is about modesty. And she shattered my own stereotypes in the sense that she was incredibly creative and so much part of the process. And I ended up collaborating with her so many times. And I love working with her. She brings an extra layer of the Black abaya, and she's an artist herself, and I love working with her. At the same time, I've been collaborating in the Boston area with Natalie on the right. And I found that I had a similar relationship with those two women. So I eventually connected them as well on Instagram. And I wanted to start this dialogue between them, that I would make a picture with one and we would create another picture as a response with the other. And then COVID happened and this didn't quite happen, but they've been in touch since. And I love that, because for me, this is taking that sense of connecting my two cultures to a more literal way, in a way, by connecting the two women. Can we please go to the next slide? So this is what I had been working on all along. And the next 3 slides I'm going to show are just ways that I've been working with historic moments that have been happening, and that sometimes I would get out of what the project I'm working on because I needed to do this project. In 2019 in October, there was a major protest in what you call Thawra in Lebanon, and they were protesting against the government about the corruption. But what I found incredible is that the women were as the forefront of it all, and it was actually so beautiful to see that they were powerful. And so I made a side project of photographing these women. If can we go to the next slide, please? And then in August 4th of 2020, there was the major explosions at the port in Lebanon. And that was horrible on every level possible. And I needed to, in a way, find a response to that through my art and through what I know, what I could do. So I offered a fundraiser by offering my prints for sale. And I offered the first print, the image on the left, in a 10 by 12 size. And I sent an email, and within 5 hours they had sold out. It was an edition of 30. I didn't even have time to shut down the fundraiser. So I ended up selling 30 plus 3, raising with that alone $33,000 for an organization to send help for Lebanon. So the picture so I ended up offering another photograph, which is the photo on the right, and within 5 days it's also sold out. So the reason I mentioned this, and if we could go to the next slide as well, please, is this was a rough year on so many levels, and I found that connecting with people and people who are willing to help me raise money with so fast that I raised $67,000 in 5 days, which is incredible. And then at the same time, we're living in COVID, and I was trying to connect with people. So I started, I put an Instagram post where I would, if you live in the Boston area within 30 minutes of Brookline, I'd love to come and photograph you at your window. And the response I got was incredible. So I tie all the two experiences together in the sense that it was a rough year on so many levels, but I chose to focus on what connects us, and that sense of humanity that for me was so much more. That was the silver lining in all what we had lived. So I ended up photographing a lot of people. And as you all know, we're still living through COVID. So there was a sense of the time passing. I tried to photograph in this, how families were together, like the picture in the middle, but also how kids were stuck at home. And at the 2 pictures at the bottom, there was the sense of the passing of time, and we're still in it. So I actually have made a 3rd picture of Susan at the bottom, eventually, that over Christmas. And so again, it's a sense of this passing of time, and we're still in that. And if we could go to my last slide, please. And again, as time went on, I thought what was interesting, what was happening. First, you could start seeing in the reflection through the window how the landscape is changing, where it was almost winter in the first one, how it became green, it became summer. But also what was changing was that people started dressing up for the shoots, and people started performing in the window. So it's almost like this window became a frame or a stage for people to be themselves through it. And in some weird way, I found that even though I'm photographing for another project, it tied me back to my She project, where I'm photographing women in relation to the landscape, because in some level, the landscape is reflected here. So that's it. If I have I just want to read one thing, if I have a minute, not even, that I want to say, that my work addresses the states of becoming, the fraught beauty and vulnerability of growing up in the context of the visceral relationship to our physical environment and universal humanity. But it's also about collaboration, experimentation, performance, empowerment, and about pushing the limits of creativity and self-expression, both for the women and for myself. Another essential element for my work is female representation in art, especially the representation of Middle Eastern women. Artists making work in and about the Middle East might constantly combat Orientalist visions that remain rooted in the collective Western unconscious. So my work takes a contemporary look at women living in the everyday circumstances and focuses on building visual, but also representational associations between the portrayal of women in the United States and the Middle East. And without further ado, I am.
Thank you, Rania. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you mentioned that last part, because I do have a, when we eventually do get into a conversation, I want to talk a little bit more about that, about this sort of disrupting Orientalist visions of, women from the Arab world, from the Middle East. And so we can talk about that in a little bit. And I was there just to go back to that idea, to that image of Raven standing in front. I can't remember whether I was the one who took that photograph or it was one of my colleagues, but I remember when she walked in, the first people she saw were security, museum security, and they immediately recognized her and treated her like a superstar, which she was. And it was profoundly moving to see her in front of her portrait. It was just a really wonderful experience for me. So thank you. And I wanted to move on to Ambreen, who Rania knows through the Boston art world, because Ambreen Butt used to be based in Boston before she moved to Salt Lake, Texas. So I just want to give a little bit of a bio on Ambreen Butt, who's born in Lahore, Pakistan, and creates works that explore the complexities of contemporary global politics, female identity, and living as a Muslim in the United States. She received her BFA in traditional Indian and Persian miniature painting from the National College of Arts in Lahore, and earned her MFA in painting in 1997 from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. Ambreen's work has been featured in solo exhibitions at institutions including the Dallas Contemporary, Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, among many others. She has been the recipient of numerous awards, including the very prestigious Joan Mitchell Foundation grant. In 1999, she was the first recipient of the James and Audrey Foster Prize from the ICA in Boston, in addition to being an artist in residence at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum that same year. Her work is in private and public collections, including at the MFA, the Library of Congress in Washington, DC, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, the MFA in Houston, the De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum in Massachusetts, and the US Art and Embassies in Islamabad in Pakistan. Ambreen's work was featured in a focused exhibition at NIMWA in 2019 called Ambreen Butt, Mark My Words. This was a show that I curated, one of the first shows that I conceived of from start to finish, and worked very closely with Ambreen, and I'm extremely proud of having had this exhibition at NIMWA. It featured a number of Ambreen's mixed media works and prints from 2008 to the present day that reveal her exceptional mark-making practices, which Ambreen will talk about in just a minute. Carolyn, if you can go to the next slide. I just want to point to a review of the exhibition from the Washington Post, which wrote that Ambreen Butt makes a striking first impression. Unlike some conceptual or political art, which all too often conveys its message at the expense of its aesthetics, these works are both emotionally resonant and visually captivating. For Butt, making beautiful art about ugly subjects is a conscious choice. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to encapsulate the spirit of that show. So without yapping on too much on my end, I will let Ambreen take over and tell us a little bit more. Welcome, Ambreen.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Aureen. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you. And thank you for providing this opportunity for me and Rania to reconnect. We've been talking about it for a long time, that either she'll visit or I'll visit back Boston. But so this is actually, it is happening in the right time, in the right place, right? Virtual world. And thank you so much, Carolyn, because you will be flipping a lot of my slides. So thanks a lot for, all that you're doing behind the scenes. I'm gonna, since Aureen had given a pretty elaborate introduction of my work, so I'll just, I brought some images that are most relevant to this discussion. And I basically split my practice into two phases of my life as an artist. So some earlier figurative works and the most recent text-based text-based works. So without further delay, I'm just going to dive right into it. So if we can move to my first slide. Thank you. So my journey today begins here with the series, I Must Utter What Comes to My Lips, circa 2003. The title has been translated from a Punjabi poem by 17th century Sufi poet, commonly known as Bulleh Shah. This series is a result of the events that took place after the tragedy of September 11th and how those events impacted individual lives. My medium here is watercolors with white gouache on a traditional handmade paper called wasli, originally used by the master miniaturist of Indo-Persian tradition. I choose to address this series with the techniques of classical miniature painting because of its illustrative quality, narrative-based imagery, as well as subtle symbolism. This series changed the way I had always seen the female heroine in my work. Her journey from the personal to political made her a protagonist warrior. She is the vehicle for the viewers to enter into the symbolic landscape of painting, a place of defense, survival, and escape. She is seen here in her blue, red, and a touch of white garments, holding on to the world that she has grown for herself. While four birds are seen engaged in an act of invasion, taking on a role of the oppressor. She is, on the other hand, she appears on the other hand as an oppressed. So next slide, please. The game has gone in reverse in this small painting of 8 by 5.5 inches. The one that was the victim once is now in control. The identical twins standing back to back in a Western style, both blindfolded with their own ideological flags, one with nationalism and the other with extreme religiosity, seen engaged in the act of violence that is apparent in the form of collateral damage. The surface of this painting is made with very small redundant marks of tea and coffee, a technique of rendering in miniature painting that is called bardakht. Next slide, please. This work shows a person very carefully walking on a tightrope. A little impetuous move can result in a fall, a symbolism used particularly to define what it is like to be a Muslim in the post-9/11 era in this world. Next slide, please. My interest in the female heroine or the Naika from the Mughal tradition of Indian miniature painting had led me to create a series of works that address the historical representation of the female body in this particular genre. My visual investigations revealed to me how the Naika was imagined and created by the male artist of Indian subcontinent centuries ago. She was a man's notion of a woman, very quiet, passive, and unchallenging. I also looked at the male heroes of the Persian miniature painting, heroes like Amir Hamza or Rustam and Sohrab, and wondered how these legendary characters had been fantasized and how there had never been any female heroes and warriors like them. My inspiration for the series, I Need a Hero, came from a real-life female hero, Mukhtara Mai, a village woman from Pakistan who confronted her rapists and brought them to justice with immense bravery while turning this trauma into a staunch force of activism. I Need a Hero suggests a different narrative from that of the classical one. The female is seen wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, fighting the demons with a sword in her hands. Here, she is the warrior who is in the game to win, regardless of the consequences. My protagonist is not an idealized character. She is not seen through the gaze of a male artist, but rather through the gaze of a female artist. She is a mirror in which many women see their faces. Next slide, please. As much as I acknowledge the bravery and the good fight of this heroine, I also understand and relate with her dilemma. She carries a burden over her shoulder, well, in this case, on her back and over her head. Her life is not her anymore. There are many others who look up at her in inspiration, and she carries their burden with her. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. So this was one of my studio wall from 2008. After having been away from Pakistan for almost 12 years, I finally made a trip back to reconnect with the motherland. 2007 was the time of General Pervez Musharraf's rule, who apparently held the two most important positions in the country. He was the president as well as the chief of the army staff. He used his authority to suspend the justice of the country, which resulted in massive protests on the streets, primarily led by the lawyers and the judges. Places were shut down, arrests were made, which also included some of my professional friends and family members. I came back with the images of my home country that followed me for a long time. I would read the news, cut out images from the mass media, and would pin them on the studio wall. Later, that gave birth to a series called Dirty Pretty. Next slide, please. These pieces are done on multiple layers of mylar paper. Each layer is worked upon, it is cut, it is stitched, drawn, and painted upon, and then put back together. This and the next piece are called The Great Hunt. They are made by layering and juxtaposing two kinds of images, one of a classical miniature painting, the original Great Hunt, and the images from the mass media that I had collected of the protests and arrests of people during Musharraf's raid. Next slide, please. The classical 16th century Great Hunt from V&A collection in London shows the Mughal Emperor Akbar in a hunting scene somewhere near today's Afghanistan and Pakistan. This exquisitely painted hunting scene shows Akbar and his trained cheetahs hunting the deers and gazelles. The expressions on their faces are haunting and frightening. You can almost see tears flying off their faces. It is said that there was so much bloodshed in that field that it impacted Akbar immensely, and he almost became a different person, encouraging peace through diversity. He also invented a sect called Deen-e-Ilahi, where he would encourage all religions to come together. We can move to the next slide. Okay. So I juxtapose the imagery of the Great Hunt, the original Great Hunt, with the images from the President Musharraf's state of emergency. In a very symbolic way, it reminded me of Akbar's The Great Hunt. So the images that you see here are from those clips that you saw on my wall. And they are drawn, but they're drawn with the stitch. So I would place a hole in a mylar, and then I would stitch them with a thread and needle. You can move to the next slide, please. So these are all details of that diptych that you're seeing. You can keep moving. And that's the piece that is at Namwal's collection. This is also the Great Hunt series. Next slide. And here's some details. Yes. Right. So the use of tone text in my work began when I incorporated bits of my own journal into a larger drawing. The ritual of rejecting the written version of self preserved in the journal and processing it into a new form, one which had to be read and interpreted in new ways, exposed the vulnerability of the written word and posed new questions about its meaning. Through this medium, I began to explore the ways of transforming text to create images that can be familiar yet untranslatable. The intent of the drawing is to compel the viewer to look at the text not as a form to be read, but to be viewed and interpreted. Next slide, please. Pages of Deception, circa 2012. This work is formatted in a glorious manuscript style, 2 panels side by side referencing an open page of a book, are filled with torn pieces of text that are glued on the surface. The particular text used in this piece is from the documents of a famous terrorism trial based in Massachusetts. And earlier when Oreen was showing the slides, you could see the scale of this. They're almost like 6 feet tall, each panel. You can move the next slides, Caroline, thank you. Okay. Small bits of these fragmented documents from both the defense and the prosecutor are laid systematically on each side of the panel, creating a Vortex-like pattern reminiscent of pages from classical Islamic calligraphy. The two panels, each carrying its own argument, are visually identical and deceiving the viewer about their content. Next slide, please. The section enforces the viewer to look at the text as an image and reminds us that the reading of the written word is in fact always an interpretation. Next slide, please. Say My Name, circa 2019, is a series dedicated to the young casualties of US drone strikes in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Each work displays shredded pieces of paper in varied patterns, and shredded pieces repeat the name and age of a single victim. For instance, this is Aisha 3, a young victim whose name was Aisha and who was 3 years old at the time the drone struck and ended her life. Her name has been written on a piece of paper over and over again, and then shredded. The shredded pieces are then glued on a tea-stained surface, one mark at a time. Next slide, please. Similarly, in this drawing, Ilyas 13, a dragon is seen with its mouth wide open, as if to annihilate the shredded name of the victim. There is a contrast between the beauty, the apparent beauty of the image and the horrid reality of political violence. Next slide, please. Muhammad Yunus, 16. So, you can move to the next one. Schwab 8. So these pieces were a part of the exhibition at NUMBA in 2019. And I think that's it for today. I think my time's up, but I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Umbreen. And those Say My Name. I mean, I know I told you a million times that those are some of my favorite works. And I hope people understand those are thousands. I mean, I don't know if you know a number, how many pieces of paper are on each of those drawings, as you call them, glued onto that background one at a time. So this is incredibly labor-intensive work that I told Umbreen she was crazy to undertake. But I remember you telling me that this was actually quite cathartic for you to be able to control some amount of chaos in an otherwise very chaotic world that you can't control, right? So you have some control within a world of disorder, which I've heard other artists say too, which was it's quite incredible. So I do want to get into a conversation with two of my favorite people, and I want to start with this sort of moment in American history and really world history that you both mentioned, which was 9/11. And Rania, you mentioned that you started your presentation off with that in many ways, your work in photography came as a, as a response to the atmosphere in the environment in America after 9/11. And, I think back to my time there. I was in the US for maybe a few years at that time. We had just become naturalized citizens maybe a year or two before 2001. And that moment, and I was in high school in Brooklyn at the time, so I was living in New York. It was really a turning point in how I saw myself, especially as a brown-skinned woman, a Muslim woman living in America. And it was a real formative experience and moment for me and my family, and it continues to shape how I see myself in the art world. So for example, as a curator, it was really important, it has become really important and a personal objective of mine to increase the visibility of Muslim artists, of South Asian artists, of Middle Eastern artists, and increase visibility of voices like yours, like both of yours. So Rania, if I start with you again. Can you speak a little bit more to what you were responding to post 9/11 in American society? Was it a need to assert something about your hyphenated identity? Was it to disrupt stereotypes? What were you responding to in your art there?
You know, am I muted or not? I was actually, I think I was responding to all of that. You know, up to that point, I mean, I wasn't, you know, I grew up in a civil war, and you know, it was complicated. I'm originally Palestinian and I'm not Muslim. And in Lebanon, it seemed like the civil war was the Christians against the Palestinians at some point. And people like me didn't fit in anywhere. I mean, we were not religious at all. But so I didn't want to identify as any of that. And I left Lebanon to come to the US to kind of put all of that behind me, to start from scratch. And, you know, I was working as an architect, I got married, we're having kids, we bought a house and I moved there. So and all of a sudden, after September 11, everything I was trying to bury kind of came to the surface. And that, what am I talking about? I am, you know, Lebanese, I am Palestinian, and this is part of who I am. But by then I also became American. So, and how do you reconcile all that when the people are saying them versus us? I mean, I am them and I am us, right? So what am I? So I honestly think I became a photographer or an artist to deal with that originally. And it kind of stayed with me in different ways. It evolved with me. At first, I went with a cousin of mine to a Palestinian refugee camp. And again, I grew up in a civil war. My circle in Lebanon was tiny. So I didn't know that people within a 5-minute drive used to live in those conditions. So I started wanting to tell that story, and the intimacy of the work that I made of my kids gave me that kind of visual training and that I was looking for, in that to tell people's story. But eventually through the years, I feel like all the work I did, I started mixing the two cultures, because in a way, that's who I am. And I am back and forth between both. And I love it. Then some people, it shatters their stereotype when you see a woman in their bedroom that could look 100% American. I mean, like, people tend to think, sorry, I'm going over, that people in the Middle East or the Arab world or the Muslim world, everybody's veiled or oppressed or whatever it is. And this is a very one-dimensional way of thinking, and it's so wrong. And so that was, for me, a way of dealing with it. Sorry for the rant.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I too, since that moment, I mean, maybe I was just naive and young. I mean, I didn't realize there was a them versus us up until that moment of 9/11, and how that society had completely changed. And since then, like you, I've also been trying to sort of negotiate these various identities. I believe you had called it a hyphenated identity at some point, and I tend to agree with that. Ambreen, to kind of include you in the conversation too, has there been a moment for you where you felt like my art needs to respond to this political climate of, whatever it might be, Islamophobia, prejudice, bigotry? And you also moved to the States in the late 90s, I believe, mid to late 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, so has there been a moment like this for you?
I never pick on, this is what I'm going to work on. It's never like that for me. It's like a natural process, whatever comes out. And we are a product of our environment. So whatever goes on around us, it just, I always used to say, and I still believe in that, being an artist is just almost like, your body is like, it has this like thousands and thousands of open pores, and the life that happens around you, it just kind of, your body sucks that through this pores, and then it comes out in another form, in the form of language, visual language in my case. So going back to the identity issue, I mean, I think it's identity for me, it's just like you can't, this is not something that I can put my finger on. It's such a fluid thing, and all of us have multiple sides, and some of the sides we haven't even discovered. And it really depends on what's happening around you, and then that part of the identity takes over, and that becomes more visible. So my Muslim identity, I mean, obviously religion plays an important role. It has always played an important role in my growing up, and still today. But I think I probably would have been a different kind of Muslim if I was staying in Pakistan. And seeing it through the lens of a person who's living with so many different kinds of people, it has really kind of enlightened me in many different ways. If I was growing up in Pakistan, I think I was more of like, religion was kind of so integrated in the culture. It was part of the culture. I never saw it as, something, separate from it. So, so post 9/11, of course, there are a lot of things that, one of the painting that in my presentation that you saw, where a woman was standing, like walking on a tightrope, and this whole thing, like either you with us or with the terrorists, that kind of rhetoric out there, it just affects you, and that kind of was a result of that. Like, what do you mean? It was almost like for a lot of Muslims in this country, was almost like, the question came, are you an American, or are you if you're a Muslim, then you like,
yeah, like they could be mutually exclusive things. You had to be one or the other, right? Or
tightrope that I had painted, you could see that there are small little flags, that that you use for decoration when during the celebration, like Independence Day celebration. We used to do that in Pakistan. I mean, here I see that in America as well.
Yeah.
So there are flags that kind of represent all these different associations, being Pakistani or being, the American, and then she is walking on this rope that like she's so careful. Anything comes out of her mouth can be seen in a way that, oh, you're not patriotic, you're not American, you're with the terrorist, and that kind of stuff.
To Rania's point, there's also the stereotype that if you are from these certain regions, that you're automatically considered Muslim, and it's Middle East is certainly not a monolithic region. There's just so many cultures, languages, and religious beliefs. So I wanted to take what you both said and go to sort of a philosophical question that I've been thinking about, both as somebody who is from the diaspora, but also somebody who is part of an institution, an art institution. And that's this idea of artists and being labeled, which we tend to do in art historical institutions, in academia. There are those who say that being labeled as a so-called a Middle Eastern artist, an Arab artist, a Muslim artist, is an act of tokenism, right? And it sort of further alienates them from the mainstream art world. And then there are artists who say that their art is informed by and is a reflection of their lived experiences, which are so inherently tied to gender and race, sexuality, religion, culture, all of these different factors, and that their art practice cannot be divorced from those things that they personally identify it with. So where do you two fall in this discourse? Is there a space for somewhere in the middle? Is there an in-between somewhere on these two sides of the debate? So Ambreen, since you last spoke, let's start with you and then go to Rania.
So, they really don't labels. I think when I started my art practice in the professional world, it used to bother me quite a bit, but not anymore, because they don't really do anything to me or my artwork. So the work will continue no matter what, I'm going to keep getting old, but I will keep working as much as I can. So, and then there are these, again, how the world around you, like how your social, political, milieu changes, people start seeing you according to what's happening in the world, So before, I know when I was younger, I was always seen as very exotic, in the art world. My work was seen, it's, very something that, you don't have an access to, you find it exotic. But then there were times and hey, this, and then there was a time she's a feminist. I mean, I do relate with a lot of things, I am feminist in many, I think there are so many things that I feel very strongly about, but just that's not what my work is all about. And, there is an outside that affects the inside, but then there's an inside which is a lot bigger than the outside world for me. I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but
what about you,
is this
Rania?
what you asked?
Yeah, exactly. That is because you talked about identity being so fluid that just kind of brought me to this idea. And Rania also mentioned this, that she was trying to get away from certain things, and then this moment in American history happened where she's like, of course I'm these things, so let me address it through my art. So Rania, do you have something to add to that?
I feel like, I was also on a panel last week about the female gaze, and I feel like people love to put categories on things, like you're a woman artist, you're a Middle Eastern artist, and I'm going to answer a little like Ambreen, I guess. I'm me, right? I mean, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I am Lebanese, I'm Palestinian, I'm American. I mean, the work is coming from where I am. So if people want to label me, I mean, let them label me, but I'm not trying to do, to make, I mean, I'm a feminist, but I'm not trying to make feminist art. So I feel like, sometimes the art goes and has its own life, and then people could put different labels on it. But I'm making something, again, that's coming from the inside, but also the outside is kind of affecting how I'm relating to it, right? I don't know if I'm making sense either. But so I feel that's important, not to tend to reduce things to labels, but at the same time, I think it's a beautiful time to be an artist, because as a woman now, we have more voice as artists from different places. I mean, there's more of a platform to express that. So maybe this is a good time to be doing that. And there's more of an audience willing to listen to different stories. So I think if we had, that's the gift to have. There's a book by Amin Maalouf, and I don't remember the name in English, but it was called Les Identités Meurtrières. And I'll find the name and send it to everybody. But it's about what makes your identity. And it's like all the little pieces that make you who you are. And exactly like Ambreen said, at some point there's one identity that takes over. But you are a package of all of that. And it's important not to just start pinning one, because this is what almost becomes stereotyping or leads to different to putting labels again, right?
Yeah, and all these ideologies, I mean, because we're living in the global world, so all these ideologies, you can't just, they're not specific to one thing. So like, for instance, feminism, I mean, there are so many different faces of that, depending on, where you are in the world, and who, and women are going through so many different things in so many different societies, and their idea of feminism is so different from, let's say, the two of us sitting here, in America and talking about it. So, there was a show at the Brooklyn Museum, I think 2007, Global Feminism, curated by Linda Nochlin and Maura Riley. And that was a, they invited like these 80 something women artists from all around the world, because all of their, they brought in their own perspective of what feminism was for them. And, honestly, it was very different. Some of the things that I just couldn't relate with a lot of, it's like, could this be an issue? And, because I just was not in their, shoes. So that's the thing, it really,
and another thing about identity as well, like speaking a little bit of that, I owe a lot to the fact that I live here and I became American. I mean, growing up in Lebanon, my father was trying to shield me during the war, and he's like, "You're Lebanese. The Palestinian problem is not yours. It's his problem." And so he was trying to protect me. I became interested in human rights and visiting the camps and all of that by stepping away from all of this. So I give a lot of credit to the American in me as well, that made me be able to look at the Middle East with different eyes. If that makes sense somehow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right, Ambreen. I mean, both of you, the female empowerment. I mean, I think when we talk about feminism, we talk about this sort of empowerment of voices that were perhaps previously marginalized. That takes many forms, and there are many iterations of what female empowerment means. But I do want to ask you both this next question, that you do both explore this idea of gendered identity in your work, and you both of you have had these long journeys as women in the arts. So what are some of these challenges? You both talk about, you do your own thing and the labels come afterwards. What are some of the challenges that you have faced as women artists, and have you personally seen any changes in the art world since you've been active in it? Rania? Oh, Ambreen, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rania, if she wants to. Okay.
To be honest with you, I don't think I faced a challenge as a woman artist. I think I don't know, maybe I'm finding that on the contrary, there are more opportunities right now. And I don't know, coming from the Arab world and being a woman in a way has helped my artistic career in many ways, in making the art, but also in having the art be received in this area. I mean, for me, it was a little bit the opposite, where the first time I had a show in Lebanon, I was really nervous about how it's going to be viewed there, because my art grew here, so, and it was to the credit. I mean, people were willing to look in the mirror and look at some of the stuff that was happening and embrace it. So I don't know, and maybe I'll get inspired by something else when Ambreen says it, but
well, I think part of what you're saying, Rania, is because, growing up, going to museums, I've always loved museums, but I never saw anyone who looked like me on the walls, or anyone who really represented what anything that I necessarily identified with on the walls. And I grew up in New York again, so there were tons of museums around. So what I think what you're kind of pointing to is that there was a thirst, for art like yours, so people could walk into the walls, into the galleries of a museum and see photographs, imagery like yours. And I think that's why your work has been received so well, and people seem to connect to it right away, whether that's women in Lebanon, in the Middle East, or whether that's women here. I mean, you're able to kind of really capture the individuality of your various sitters in a way where they're able to connect to it. So I think that's why that your work has been so, just so quickly able to connect to visitors and audiences.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like the challenge was a little bit that early on, if there's a chance to think about it, people wanted to see work from the Middle East and the Arab world that was Orientalist. So, in that sense, I had to, and I wanted to be away from that. I'm sick and tired of people just talking about the hijab, the veil, and all of that. I mean, there's so much more to the whole area than that. I mean, people wear it like Ambreen because they want to or they don't want to. It's not always like some of the women I photograph are wearing the veil, some aren't. It's because it's a choice they made. It's not up to me to decide or to portray them a certain way. So for me, the challenge was to kind of make sure I stay away from that Orientalist view. So I don't know, yeah.
And to show the multiplicity of lives that exist from this region. Yeah, Ambreen?
Well, I think, there's one thing that I think that has always been, in my eyes, been an issue, regardless of, which part of the world women are from. Like hundreds and thousands of hours of labor that women put in to, no matter what they do, whether they're raising kids, doing their work, it goes unappreciated, unvalued. And for being an artist, I'll just say definitely, I literally put thousands of hours of labor into my work. And, I still feel, even though I'm very grateful that I get, my art gets appreciated, Namwa, exhibited my work and, many other museums, but I still feel that it is not, appreciated enough, the amount of labor I put in. And that applies to everything in life that women are doing. This has to change. I mean, it is changing slowly, but there's, but I mean, I don't know. We just like
It's the dual lives, right? You're expected to, the women are expected to live certain lives that
this
are, yeah, go ahead.
vicious cycle. You know what? Once you trap and you just think that, and okay, this is what you're supposed to do. You continue to do that, but at least give the value.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are not doing the dirty work, who else is going to do the dirty work? Because we are holding your crown up high. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all going to collapse if it's not on women's role, the labor that women are putting in.
Invisible labor is a huge issue, and I mean, I think that's what a lot of women artists point to, is that they spend all of this time on their craft as well as in their personal lives. I mean, just from societal expectations of having to raise a family and so on, in addition to practicing their craft, and so much has gone sort of unnoticed, and the equity there, it just doesn't match up to the amount of work that women put in to having a successful career and to raising, having successful personal life.
And believe me, just getting yourself out to the studio, that is not easy. Just picking up a bag and going to work, it's not like that. We are already drained by the time in the end, with the amount of things that we have to do. And sadly, the saddest part is that many women don't even get to the studio, because then they are trapped in that vicious cycle. And there are so many wonderful artists, brilliant minds that are there. And it's just,
so this is an impossible question. How do you achieve a kind of equity then, when that burden is lessened? I mean, this is totally unfair.
No, I don't know. I'm going to speak for me. I feel like being a woman and a mother made me become a photographer and an artist. So I'm embracing it in ways, and it made me very good at juggling. I mean, I feel like what you're doing, Ambreen, but like now my kids are a little older and they're not at home. I find that I'm working all the time, and I feel there was a better balance when I had the kids at home, because it forced me to take more time away from working. And so I feel like, and it was like juggling. I mean, one ball falls, everything collapses, right? But I feel like it made me who I am. I might have never become a photographer. I'd still be practicing architecture, which I could have a great career and loved it. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in a way I feel lucky. I'm glad to be a woman and to have the opportunity to be making my art and to be a mother and to have had the luck to be able to juggling it all.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I definitely, being, I think it's lucky to be a woman, I mean.
This is, Ambreen's like, I can't wait till my kids leave for college.
But I have learned that this role never ends, because I still call.
Oh no, it doesn't end.
For my problems, I still call my mom, and I eat up her ears. But and I can see that this is.
Oh no, it doesn't end. Trust me, and the problem gets bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think you're both touching on some real frustrations. I mean, that's also reflected in gallery representation for women artists and the art market for women artists, who obviously don't up until even this point, they haven't reached the kind of equity as male artists, because so often women have all of these other responsibilities too. I mean, I think these are some real actual concerns in the art world that we haven't fully addressed yet. And so I think we have gotten into this Carolyn, my colleague, is probably in the background going, wow, these three are going on in this conversation. But I do have one more question, and it's just to kind of go back to the art, because I love both of your art so much. I mean, Rania, you're a photographer. Ambreen, you have these mixed media works. And I remember, Ambreen, that you said this quote a couple of times, and I always remember it, is that you want to convey your ideas through beauty, not a sledgehammer. And I actually see that in both of your both of your art, this like aesthetic appeal, that this is so visually inviting and seductive, and you're both investing a lot of time in texture and color. Can you both speak a little bit to that? Rania, you talked about, texture being an important part of your training as an architect. Amreen, you also said that, it's sort of a means to get people to look deeper into your artwork. Can you both speak to just the form of your works and because some of your subject matter is very gritty and dark about protests and various kinds of real social conditions, but you have this sort of veneer of beauty in showing those very dark subject matter. So Amreen, since it was your quote that I'm citing here, let's.
I love that quote. I want to steal that quote. I love that quote.
I do too. Yeah.
So, Aureen, I think, when I chose to major in miniature painting, and, I did not know much about it. I just had, I have no shame in admitting that, I just didn't have any intellectual understanding of that art form. And I was just drawn to them because of their beauty and the aesthetics. And I think I was the least patient person to just be sitting on the floor and making marks and doing the at that time when I chose to major in it. And through the process I learned, you have to go through this painful process in order to see the result. Like what it was doing to me after looking at my own painting. So this was one of the characteristics, of that art form, that it's just, aesthetics, seduction, to the viewer. And I thought this is such a great element that can be used because, I wanted my art, since the day I wanted to be an artist, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted my art to, to kind of work as a written text, what the text does to a reader. I wanted it to convey to through the beauty of whatever was surrounded us, whether it's the broken pieces of the society, which I tend to see more. I pick them up and then put them together, try to create something beautiful out of it, so that the viewer has no way to avoid it, because that's the language that works the best. I think. I could still make my point by doing something, maybe not aesthetically pleasing, but I don't think that work would ever stay with as many people after it's out of sight. So I want the work to kind of travel with the viewer wherever they go after they've seen it, or for, I hope.
Stay with them, resonate with them and stay with them. Yeah. Rania, what about you?
Well, I love what she said, and I agree with a lot of it. And I find that I'm photographing people and I find them all beautiful. I feel I see the beauty in it. I learned to see the beauty even in moments that are not beautiful, because people are bringing their humanity to it. And I feel like I owe it to people I photograph to show them in the most beautiful way I can. It doesn't mean the story is rosy and pretty, but I think it's important for me to portray them that way. And it's the visual training that's so much part of my background. I'm trained as an architect. I'm very aware of the full frame of my images. Everything that goes in the frame has a place in it. And I'm aware of light and texture, as you say. So it's something that somehow became part of how I see things in the first place. But I feel also like I did learn to see the beauty, even like in refugee camps or in difficult situation, because, and there are moments like the woman breastfeeding her baby with the little doll next to her. Yes, the walls are, it's beautiful. And I feel like also there's a lot of ugliness being portrayed out of the Middle East, and I did not want to do more of that. Let's put it this way. And there's love in my images, and I I just have to follow my instinct in that way.
Great instincts, Rania. I love
Huh?
that. Yeah,
Great instincts. Great instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could stare at both of your images I have spent hours looking at both of your images. I mean, I think that is one of the things that strike people right away. And then you're right, Umbreen, it sort of draws people in, and then they start to see these sort of deeper issues, deeper social conditions, I say, that they can connect to, and opens their eyes. I mean, I know from the show, Umbreen, and at Nimwa of your works, there were times when there was sort of pin drop silence after I mentioned certain thing about your Say My Name works, for example. Like when we first mentioned Aisha's 3 years old, she was killed by an American drone strike. I mean, there was silence in that room because they think of these like really beautiful text-based work, and then they see the kind of darkness behind it. And that kind of really visceral reaction is exactly what we in the arts kind of want from our audiences, right? So with that, I will kind of close out this wonderful talk. I mean, this was just such an amazing afternoon with you. So thank you, Rania and Umbreen, for joining me today. I'm really thrilled to have been able to celebrate the two of you and to celebrate with you on International Women's Day. And I'm also so honored to call you both my friends who I've met through this process of being in the arts and featuring your works at Nimwa, and women that I look up to in the field. And I just cannot personally wait to see what's to come in both of your practices. Thank you to Carolyn Higgins, who has been planning all the programming for International Women's Day and who's behind the scenes right now. Thank you to all my colleagues. And I hope everyone who is watching this has enjoyed this conversation, because I certainly have. And just wishing everyone a very happy International Women's Day. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And Umbreen, what an honor to be with you again. I miss you in Boston.
We have to do this more often.
Yeah.
Umbreen, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, I want to mention Umbreen wrote a gorgeous essay in my book. So
thank you.
I'm very honored. Yeah.
Yeah.